Hi guys, this little video is going to be hopefully short and take you through some basic Archicad settings that you may have come across and found a little bit frustrating, and we're just going to introduce you to them and then maybe spend a little bit of time on settings dialog boxes for the wall, slab and roof so that you can actually find your way around them a little bit better. Before we start that though, I'm going to just show you some basic ones to do with like story settings, and this is quite an important one because it determines where you start the building by drawing the walls and at what level. And you might see in this example we've got sea level data, and it's saying here that the sea level is at basically sea level 0, and we're saying that our house is up a hill a bit. It's up like 10,000 millimeters or 10 meters up the road from the beach. Okay, and you can see that when you change these things, if I make that 2480, it automatically changes the one above it. I'll go back to 2450. You should see the things go back. And I'll make a drastic change here. I'll change this to 5000 temporarily. And you'll see that the composite levels up above change as well. So it's quite important because it affects settings like the roof and the walls and the slabs. And it's really important for us to know things like what story we're actually modeling the element on and what layer it should be. Obviously, if you're doing a skyscraper, you can insert things above. If you're doing a nuclear shelter, you insert it below. But we're not doing any of that. Okay, we'll move on to one of the ones that you probably have come across before now, which is the wall settings. And there's a number of ways you can get at this one. You can select the wall and then just click this little icon. That pulls up the dialog. Or you can double click the wall tool, and that does the same. Gets the same end result. Now, when you look at these things, well, let's look at the top link and the home story first. So at the minute, because I'm on sea level data, it's saying that's the home story. So I don't really want to be there. I'm going to come out of that, go to the ground floor, and then open the settings again. And you'll see that it says, okay, you want to draw a wall. We assume it wants to be on the ground floor. And because you've only got one more story above, which is your roof, we're going to assume that you want it to go to meet the roof of your building, and that's why it's kind of locked in there at 2450. You already know that if we have to trim walls to roofs, you can add some height to them by clicking here. So that one's okay. You can see project 0, we're 10 meters above it, and that's because our ground floor is 10 meters above that. In terms of construction, there's a couple of different options up here. There's a basic one, composite, complex profile, and you can go in and basically choose some of these, but the one that we'll mostly go for is the middle one. But look, it chats about PB, which is plasterboard, and really we don't really want that. I mean, this is Archicad kind of showing off what they can do locally, and really we just want to pick one that's 90 mil thick, and whether it's exterior stud 90 or interior stud 90, it doesn't really matter. It's going to show up the same on our plans, and we won't be showing any plasterboard. So basically, we will look at this one, and if you'll forgive me a sec. Okay, so that's your composites. Um, the ones below that, I've never used them, so I don't think I'm going to show you how to use them because I don't know how to use them, and we don't need them to produce the model and the drawings that we need for our courses here, so just ignore these ones. The reference line you've already come across, and that is quite important because if you have you can pick the reference line to be inside or outside, and what's more important, for instance, is if you draw, say, a single wall, and if we zoom right in, and I'm just going to say clean wall and beam intersections because it lets you see what this black line's doing. And you see if I move it up here, you can see outside face, and you can see inside face. Uh, sorry, inside face. And basically, it all depends which direction we're going, because you nearly always want to have that line to the external side of our building, right? And then if you click clean wall and beam intersections, and you might say, how are you doing that? I'm just right clicking away from any elements with no elements selected, and you get clean wall and beam intersections. And if you zoom right in, you can see this reference line, and basically that's how Archicad tidies these things up. But as long as you've got it to the outside, we're okay. And if you basically decided to draw a rectangle wall like this, and again you just check and make sure. So at the minute it's on the wrong side, so I'm going to say I want this to be in the outside face, and then I can draw my walls, and you can see then that it's the reference line's on the outside, and it can be nicely tidied up. Okay. Now in terms of the walls, I didn't manage to change that back to the just the external studs, so I'll change that now. So that's external stud 90. Now look, the next thing we'll look at is we can close this one down, floor plan display, and really here there's not really anything for us to change. Just say show in the home story only, which means that it's drawn on the ground floor. That's where you'll see it unless you turn on the trace reference above. So what that means is if I go to the roof and I just actually I'll go to the ground floor first and make sure I can see my walls. And then if I go to the roof story, all you're seeing is the roof. But if you remember, if I right click on the ground floor and say show trace reference, you can see the walls below. Okay, so I'm going back down to the ground floor. My walls look different, but the reason for that is because the trace reference is turned on. Just click that and they look like normal again. Back to the settings. The only other thing, this model, you can choose some kind of patterns and coverings to kind of make your walls look better. And you can do it for the sides, the top, and the other side of it. And if you turn these on by making them blue, and if you want them all to be the same, you can hit this chain which links them. Now, to be honest with you, we use a thing called wall coverings, which has been developed in New Zealand, so by the local CAD image people. So we don't really use these very much. So I think really that's all we need for walls. Okay, now I'll just draw a small rectangular wall because it probably helps later on to show you what I'm going to do with some roof tool. So now we've got a wall set there. So the next one I'm going to show you is a pretty simple one, which will be a slab. Double click the slab tool again. It's very similar to the wall. Just make sure you know what story you're on, so you don't have something of the roof story and it's flying around like Harry Potter, which I'm sure the guy in our lecture will enjoy. If you look at the structure, there's basic and there's composite. Now the composite one is kind of like a tiramisu of layers, which has got insulation and damp-proof membrane and various fills. But if you look, you can't change the thickness of it. Whereas if you go to this one, we can then override that and say we want it to be 100 or whatever. And then again, just make sure the material is really what you want it. So when it's cut through in section, and here we've got ground floor, and that's where we want it to be. Again, home story only is probably relevant. There's a thing you can put on called cover fills, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's kind of things like maybe if you're doing a deck, might be something you consider, but I think for now, just turn it off. And I think in the model, if you just expand that, you can do the same thing as we did before. And you can override the surfaces if you like. And basically, I'll just draw one. Um, I'll just use this geometry. And what I can do is just set up a vector along here and here. And then Archicad will extrude it down. And you can then just click in the corner and we should have a slab. And that's basically the slab settings. One that's a bit more tricky we'll go on to is the roof. So if I go into the roof tool, you can see that you've got here a thing called the layers, which we'll chat about later. And for every single tool that I've spoken about thus far, walls and the slabs, you should always check which layer you are drawing, or sorry, modeling these elements on. So I'll reinforce that later as well. But look, you can choose a mono-pitch roof, or you can choose a multi-plane roof. And if you choose the multi-plane one, there's different ways. You can kind of choose one with a gable, or you can choose one with a hip roof. Okay, and there's just different ways of doing that. So you can probably just practice with these. I'll maybe show one of these later. But if we open up the settings again, very similar. Now, a mistake that's often made is that we draw the roof on the wrong story. So for a start, I should have probably gone, in fact, definitely gone to the roof story. So I'll go up to the roof story, and then what I'll do is I'll just right click on the ground floor and say show as trace reference. And I'll maybe do a practice roof on this one, but for now, let's just look at the settings again. So I've got a kind of a multi-plane setting, and maybe I'll look and see, I don't want it to be a hip roof. Maybe, actually I will, I'll use a hip roof. And let's go to the settings again. So we're on the roof story and we don't want it to be any higher above. So this is why this is 0. Sometimes we might have to put a minus value in there to make it touch your wall plate, but we can leave that for now. Again, you've got structure, composites. Look, I would just leave it basic for now, and you can leave it at 90. This should be worked out by Archicad based on our story settings. And this is the pitch, and we can change that. Maybe I'll try just to 10. The multi-plane geometry allows you to do things like mansards, but we don't do that. You could add one in here, and you can get two different pitches and varying pitches. So I'm just going to remove that. You can put in an eaves overhang, which for our hip roof will go all the way around. I'll just put that in. And floor plan and section, again, I wouldn't show it in all stories, show it in home story only. Sometimes we want to show it in home and one story up, but for now, just leave it. And I don't think you don't really want to cover fill, and the model works the same way as previously. Okay, so if you've got these highlighted, you can put various, and that should link them up if that one in the middle was turned on. They're all the same. Again, we can put roof coverings on, so whether you need to do this is debatable. So let me just try and put a roof on now. I think that's all we need to check out in this settings dialog. Don't worry about this plumb cut and any of this stuff for now. So we can just look at what Archicad has asked us to do. Enter first corner of pivot polygon rectangle. So I'm just going to go down here and click this corner, and then I can go up here. It says uh, pivot rectangle, and then I can just go all the way across and then zoom in and just let Archicad detect that. And you should see that there's now a hip roof. And if we go 3D all, you'll see that I've kind of put a garage over beside our building. And I just did that to illustrate how the settings work. So without this video getting much longer, I'll leave it at that. And if you have any problems trying to work these settings out, just make a note of what they are and we'll try and troubleshoot them in class. Thank you.